KJ, say it like this.
Hello Belize, and welcome to People Profiles here at the Library of African and Indian Studies. I'm Kalilah Enriquez, and I'm joined today by Andy Palacio. His name is certainly familiar to anyone who has had any affiliation with Belize over the past 20 years or so. Hello Andy, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Kalilah. Hello to you and the viewers and listeners.
Well, I'm certainly excited about getting this chance to interview you because it comes the day after your big CD release here in Belize, because it's been released internationally before.
That is true, and it's been a long time coming. I've heard about People Profiles, and it's a great feeling to finally make it to your couch.
It's an opportunity for people now to get to know the man behind the music. Who is Andy Palacio, basically, is the premise of the show. And so we take you way back now, Andy, to some years ago. Where were you born? I mean, I'd really take you back.
These are the easy questions. I was born
They'll get tougher, believe me.
I was born in the village of Barranco, which is 12 miles south of PG, only 9 miles from the Guatemalan border. It is the southernmost coastal community in this country. And my parents are Ruben Palacio and Cleofa Aviles. My father is from Barranco. My mother was born in PG but raised in Hopkins. And she went to live with my father in Barranco just shortly before I was born. So I was raised in Barranco for the most part, and really never left Barranco until I was about 13 years old.
Were you an only child?
Almost. I have a sister from my father's side.
It's older or younger?
Yeah, much older, Jacinta Palacio, and my brother from my mother's side, Elvis Lopez. There are other famous people in my family. My brother Elvis is a cab driver in Brahmapan. He's a pretty well known.
That's your brother?
Yeah, my only brother.
Actually know him, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And
ran the city council one time.
Yeah, yeah. He's tried a number of things. I'm proud of him.
Very surprising.
Yeah.
Such a small world.
True, true. And my sister Jacinta is the mother of Ifasina Efuniemi.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Ifasina happens to be the more public member of the family.
So she's your
from that
niece?
side, yeah.
Do you have a famous family?
Well, you never know.
And but you're the world famous one because now we're preparing for this international tour. But that's years down the road in our interview.
Okay.
Right now we're at childhood. What was growing up in Barranco like?
I remember our childhood being one of relative ease, because our parents were producers. My father was a fisherman and a farmer.
Not record producers.
Not yet. I'm putting that in the context of producers versus consumers.
Okay.
You know, the
I thought so.
type of society. And so we were from a working class family, you know, but that didn't deprive us of a number of things. We had the comforts of life. We had access to pretty decent education at primary school level. There were fun and games around the village in the absence of electronic games and electronic media. We were very innovative in the type of fun that we had with the limited resources at our disposal. So, you know, things like the Boy Scouts were very, very instrumental in shaping our development from boyhood to manhood. there were certain rites of passage. One which I can vividly recall was being able to swim from the point of the pier to a rock that was a couple hundred yards out to sea. The rock was just below the surface, and when there was a low tide, you could actually see the rock jutting out above the surface of the sea. We call it Watina, which means big rock. And to be able to swim from the point of the wharf to Watina was an accomplishment that any young boy growing up in Barranco aspired to. Once you were able to do that, you became one of the boys.
How old were you when you made it?
Probably before I was 12. Yeah, before I was 12. I must have been in standard 4 or standard 5. These things were, they were not really structurally scheduled, but they happened in natural course.
Barranco is a traditional Garifuna village.
It is. Almost homogeneous in its ethnic composition at that time.
Did it ever really occur to you that this is culture here? You were growing up in a cultural environment?
No, because I knew so little of the rest of Belize. I knew of our differences because Barranco has a few Kekchi communities near it, and occasionally folks from those communities would come to Barranco to sell things or also to purchase things. Going to PG was a huge event because then my mother would have to dress me up and I'd have to wear shoes. Very painful shoes. And she'd grease my foot, my face, my arms to prepare to go to town.
I don't have any pictures of that, Andy.
No.
Would have been great.
Yeah, but to go to PG was like once, perhaps twice a year, when you had to go to buy shoes at Miss Chinda or at Mr. Godoy. I didn't drink a whole Coca-Cola until I was about 12 or 13. I'd get some in a cup, but I drank my first whole Coke when I was already pretty much grown.
There are things that people maybe in Belize City take for granted.
Yeah.
And at the time, you in Barranco took Garifuna culture for granted.
Right.
Not realizing this is in the 19 what?
I was born in 60, so we're looking here at the early 70s.
Early 1970s.
Yeah.
So not realizing that in other parts of the country, that culture is something that was dying, basically.
Yeah, and even in the things that we ate, my mother could prepare a dish where the only thing she would have had to buy would be salt. Everything else could have been produced right there in the village.
How many people can say that today?
Yeah.
Not many.
And for us, chicken was the special because we had fish every day. No, my poor life, for me, fish is the special.
Things have changed.
Yeah. For me, hudut is a special.
But then it was
I took it for granted.
Took it for granted.
I hate it when I had to beat.
You grew up speaking the language as well, I assume.
Yes. To this day, I cannot speak to my mother in any other language but Garifuna. Of course, she understands English, Creole, a little Spanish, but it was just natural that I spoke to my parents in Garifuna. I spoke with my peers on the streets, on the school playground in
right
Garifuna.
there in Barranco?
Yeah.
The school?
Right.
Primary school?
Barranco RC School.
What happened when you finished?
I went
primary?
to Punta Gorda to start high school at Claver College.
So that's what changed between 12 and 13 and...
Yes, between 13 and 14. One I had to learn to ride a bike because there were no bikes in Barranco. There was no use for bikes. Now going to PG, I had to learn to ride a bike because everybody else in my class, except for those of us who had come from Barranco, knew how to ride bicycles. And Ray Mejia taught me to ride a bicycle.
Well,
yeah, he was my classmate in first form.
So you had to move to PG?
Yes, I moved over. My mother made arrangements for me to stay with a cousin of hers, who is Ernest Castro's mom, Auntie Alba. So I stayed at their house. My mother made a contribution towards my boarding and lodging expenses, but the generosity of the extended family was really what made these things possible. It was the later, when I got into fourth form, that I moved to another family member, Mrs. Ophelia Colan.
How did you find that transition from Barranco to PG, from rural to kind of urban?
There was culture shock.
It's funny to always describe Barranco to PG as culture
12
shock.
miles, and there was some cultural issues. Perhaps the most striking had to do with language, because growing up in Barranco, there was no use for Creole. Nobody spoke Creole in our village because there was nobody to speak it to. So
what about English?
English, yes, because as a matter of fact, you were practically forbidden to speak Garifuna in school. That in itself, well, that's not a desirable thing, but we had these two poles, Garifuna or English. So going to live in PG now, into this multicultural society, I had to adapt, because when we started off in high school, when we had an opportunity to speak and we spoke in English, we were ridiculed. Basically telling us, where are things going to come from? And they started calling Barranco South New York. Teasing us that we come from South New York because we couldn't speak Creole. So it was a 911 situation that I had now to learn Creole before first form ended. It was an emergency. So I learned Creole in order to fit in. Otherwise, I would have continued to be alienated and just not fit in with my peers.
Eventually that did occur?
Yeah,
you were able to fit in?
It did. And the few of us who passed the entrance exam and primary and were accepted to Cleaver College at the time, there was Harold Arzu and myself. There were very few of us. Yeah.
What about the education side of it? Was it a lot different adapting to the style of teaching there in Punta Gorda? And were you comfortable with the classes that you took? Did you enjoy it?
Yes. I had been brought up to love learning. I had had some very inspirational, very inspiring teachers throughout my elementary school education, and the love of learning was there, and there was a certain competitive spirit among us right there in the village, because first you had to be one of those who would eventually leave the village to go to high school. So if you were not one of those, there's reason to feel bad.
It made you special?
Yeah. To be able to leave Barranco to go to PG.
You were among the minority? They talk about people finishing primary school and going to high school.
And not necessarily for educational reasons or because of IQ, but in many cases for economic reasons. There were some who simply could not afford to go to high school. So when you were able to make it, you were blessed.
That's great. So you were a child of privilege, you could say.
I can say that because if I juxtapose myself beside my brother, he probably had similar academic skills. But during that time, he did not have the same access that I enjoyed later on when my parents were in a better position with the support, again, of the extended family for me to be able to go to high school.
What happened in Fort Farm why you had to move?
No, I didn't. Oh, you mean the family situation?
Right.
I think it was just, I think Mrs. Castro was moving out of PG. So my mother had to find somewhere else for me to move to. Because I was, her daughter, who was just ahead of me in high school, was about to graduate, or she had just graduated. So there was need now for her to be more mobile and not be bogged down by my presence.
Right. What was going through your mind when you were in Fort Farm and about to finish high school? Were you thinking that there were further opportunities available for you, or
yes,
you thinking this is it?
I had huge ambitions. You see, if we can jump back to second form, a couple of my close colleagues, we were all like brothers. We were growing up and developing together. There is Evan Cayetano and his nephew, who was about the same age, Leonard Cayetano. And there's Harold Arzu and myself. We were always in the top 5. And something was going on at Cleaver College at the time where there was some discomfort with the level of accomplishment from that school.
Discomfort by whom?
Parents, senior siblings. There was just there was a period of time.
Why would parents be uncomfortable with accomplishment?
If you watched GCE passes, trends, during a 4-year period prior to my entering fourth form, there had been a significant drop in GCE passes. I think in 1974, there were people passing 6, 7, 8 GCEs from Cleaver College. And right after that, people were barely passing 2 or 3, barely making 3. And some people were able to make a decision to move to what they considered better schools. So Harold, for example, came to SJC. Leonard and Evan moved to Ecumenical, and I remained at Cleaver because we did not have the economic means for me to either, especially Belize City, the cost of living would have been a killer on my parents. So this competitive thing that we had amongst ourselves was a driving force. So I always relied on these other guys to hold me by the hand and take me along, so that coming home for summer vacation, Harold would bring notes from SJC that I would then digest and do better in my lit class, because he was attending Father Hunter's lit class at SJC and looking at Caribbean literature in more depth. And I really benefited from that. So by the time we got into fourth form, I was performing at a fairly acceptable level. I was head student of my class president, that's what they call it. And I graduated as a valedictorian of the class of 77.
You graduated, valedictorian, and then what?
I wanted to go to sixth form.
Where?
Because
that would have been in Belize City?
Yeah. Len, Evan, and Harold were coming to sixth form. So I wanted to go to sixth form too.
Which sixth form was that?
SJC. SJC, and technical was also offering a sixth form level at the time. But my cousins were going to SJC, and that's where I wanted to be. And my parents said, sorry, Belize City is too far away. We really can't afford it. you'll have to choose another path. I was angry at my parents and jealous of my peers for a very long time. It really was pent up inside me, that I could not do what I wanted to do. I was this was at 17 years old, and I was on the verge of becoming really rebellious. You
had to go back to Barranco after high school.
Right. And I threw a silent tantrum.
How do you throw a silent tantrum?
Just not wanting to be bothered, and not.
You withdrew yourself.
Cooperating, yeah.
You withdrew emotionally.
Yeah. And my mother said, you better find a job. You better start looking for a teaching job. I said, I don't want to teach. Every Garifuna person becomes a teacher or a policeman or a nurse. I don't want to be one of them. I argue with my mother.
Did you have an idea what you did want to be?
Well, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to be, but I knew what I did not want to be. I didn't want to fit into this stereotypical role, because it was said so many times. You know, with lots of praise was heaped on the Garifuna population for being the best teachers, the best nurses, the best policemen, the best soldiers, but never anything else. And that really got to me as a child. So I did not want to be a teacher. And my mother said, well, you're not going to sit in my house and do nothing. So one day I picked up and I went to PG in anger, and I went to see Father Krem, and told him I need a teaching job.
I thought you were going to tell him you wanted to be a priest.
There was that phase, but
teaching job, okay.
Yeah,
Father Kramer.
Father
What
Kramer
did Father Kramer
you're
say?
hired. You'll teach in Barranco, and to me that was such a great thing, because I could have been assigned to a very remote Mayan community from which I'd come out once a month and see electricity and that kind of thing. But I didn't want that either. So to be assigned in my own village, to me, okay, I can work with that, but I still didn't want to teach.
But you did teach?
Yeah.
For
the
how
first day
long?
of school, I told my mother, if any one of those kids give me any trouble, I'll beat them up. So I went to my first day of school with...
You were 17, right?
Yeah, with deep resentment. And
What class
before I
did
knew
you teach?
it,
What class was your first class?
I was at standard 1.
Standard 1, not too
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. And eventually, during the course of the year, I found myself teaching at different levels of the whole elementary school. I gained a lot of experience, and I started to love this thing, especially the studying part of it, because now I had to study for first class. And I liked this academic thing.
First class teacher's license?
Yeah.
Teacher, how do we
First
call
class
it then?
teacher's exam.
Teacher's exam.
And I was studying and just knowing in my heart that another exam, I got it. So I studied, and I sat 2 exams simultaneously, the first class and the entrance exam to Belize Teachers College. And I aced them both. I was told later that on the Teachers College entrance exam that I had scored second highest in the country at the age of 18 then. So I was accepted to Teachers College that same year.
Were you able to attend?
Yeah. Because now I was being given a scholarship. I was being paid, and I was going to school. While my brothers who had gone to SJC were going to school, but they weren't getting paid. So now I had my little advantage.
You had your cake and you were eating it too. So that was a transfer then.
Yeah,
to
and by
city.
then I had gotten to love the teaching profession, and I had settled down comfortably into it. So, and I was seeing further. I was saying, well, I'm loving who I'm with. Instead of being with the one I love who I'm with. So, and
so at that time I didn't find a girlfriend.
Actually, by then, yeah. I was a late bloomer. I was too into my books and music.
You're always into music?
Yeah. We had a high school band in PG, made up of pretty much the same guys, including Jeff Zuniga, who had since migrated to the US. There's Douglas Williams, who was a very good guitarist. I'm not sure where he is right now. Len was a fantastic piano player. And we used to get together and jam. Eventually we found ourselves playing in church, converting these serious hymns into things that were more lively, that, you know. And Father Schultz used to chase us out of the church when we were practicing or when the Saints in reggae style. Or he would go to the switch box and flick off the switch so that we couldn't play. And we knew it was time for us to leave. And there were times when we took liberties. We should have been in church practicing hymns, but then we practiced a little Otis Redding on the side, or Ronald Lee Bob Marley, you know, just stuff that we were influenced by. Youth. Yeah.
So where are we on our timeline now? Because we'll get more into the music.
Towards the end of high school.
No, we'll get more into the music, but to regress to where we were at Teachers College just now. So you passed the entrance exam, so you had to come to Belize City.
I came to Belize City in 1979.
Was that another culture shock?
Yes. Because before that, I had only been to Belize City twice. Once when I was 8 years old, passing through on my way to visit my father in Orange Walk, because he had moved to Orange Walk to cut cane when the rice industry in Barranco was shut down. A lot of Garifuna men migrated to the north to work in the cane industry during that time. So my mother took me on a summer vacation in Otrobenke at that time. So we passed through Belize City, and I remember hearing about UBAD.
At 8 years old?
Yeah. Because this was the biggest thing happening in Belize, UBAD, and there was a legendary bad man named Jackie Vasquez. So we should not go out to the streets, otherwise Jackie Vasquez will catch you and put you in a Cobus bag.
What was the other occasion?
I was nearing the end of high school, and I had gotten a job on a construction site with my brother in Belmopan. He was a foreman at the construction site.
This time we were just building Belmopan?
This site where they have Nancha Street, Orange Street, that area.
Well, it wasn't the original Belmopan, they add more stuff.
Yeah, they were adding this new.
Adding new areas.
I lasted 1 week, and my brother fired me. So
not cut out for construction, no?
Probably not, but I don't think it was really that. I was the youngest boy on the construction site, and there were very few tools to go around. So occasionally I'd find myself without tools, because the bigger boys would come and say, "Boy, lend me a drill," and take away my drill. I can't fight back, and so when I'm caught not doing anything, one of the supervisors supposedly asked my brother, "Who's that boy who's always not doing much?" So he said, "It's my brother. So if you let me, I'll fire him." And the man said, "No, if it's your brother, it's okay." He said, "No, I'll fire him. I have to teach him a lesson." So I was fired. So I took the rest of that summer to travel through Belize City, visiting relatives here, and then I went on to Orange Walk. to visit my aunt and some other cousins who were up there. And I went to cut cane one day, and to this day that was the hardest work I've ever done.
Cutting cane?
Cutting cane and loading it onto the truck.
What does it involve?
Lifting, carrying bundles of sugar cane, and eventually hoisting them onto this truck, and all the soot that's on the cane, blackening your skin, irritating your face, and I made $30 for one day's work. That was a lot. I could have made, 5 days of made $150, but I couldn't go back a second day. I quit.
Well, this is what your father was doing for a living.
Yeah.
Certainly you must have respected him more after that one day.
Yes. And every other cañero it earned my utmost respect from that experience.
And so now you're in Belize City. You've had those 2 prior experiences. What is the difference now living here? Yes.
Yeah. For one, my parents were no longer around. I was coming of age.
You had independence now.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though while I was in Barranco, I was no longer living in my parents' house. My aunt, who lived in Orange Rock, had a house in Barranco that I was occupying. So I had virtual independence. But coming to Belize City meant even greater independence and a new set of friends, a new environment. And in Belize City, at that time, there were places like Melting Pot. There were discotheques at the different parts of Albert and Queen Street. I don't remember their names. And Wednesday night was Sisters Night. You know what Sisters Night? That's when sewing factory girls got paid. Thursday night is ladies' night. Friday night is a regular weekend party night. So is Saturday night. Sunday is jump up at Bird's Isle. The only days I have for important things is Monday and Tuesday.
So you did a lot of partying.
I did a lot of partying. Because I needed to check out the music, the girls, all the trends. I had to have all the clothes, fashion. I had to collect records.
This is the 70s now?
No, we were, well, actually,
late 70s?
Yeah, late 70s, 79.
What a time in Belize, Belize City, no?
Yeah, I was into the magazines, the music magazines, Ebony, Jet, Right On. I had these huge pin-up posters on my wall with artists that I admired: Lionel Richie, Kool and the Gang, Diana Ross, Michael Jackson, the black one.
Was it a great distraction from your studies?
It was. It was. Because I took a carefree approach to my education then. Of course, the course was rigorous at Teachers College, and from time to time I'd be jerked back to reality that this needed attention. And fortunately I was surrounded by people who took studies seriously. So I couldn't stray very far. But that was also balanced on the other side by this new group of friends.
Did it seem like an exciting and glamorous life now being in Belize City?
Yes, yes. Because now I was talking Creole. I was, fluent. I was one of the boys.
You had your barefoot pants?
Yeah, barefoot, platform shoes, afro.
The works.
The works.
Pictures and the pictures.
I don't know where those pictures are now.
Perhaps fortunately for you,
because my grandchildren will discover them someday.
Oh, when did you finish Teachers College?
I finished in 1983. Ordinarily, I would have finished in 1982. But at the end of first year, in 1980, I took a break along with about 22 other Belizean students, mostly from Belize Teachers College, to go to Nicaragua on behalf of Belize to serve in Nicaragua's National Literacy Campaign, which was a program instituted by the Sandinista government right after they took power. First, they conducted the campaign in Spanish.
Were you fluent in Spanish?
Not fluent, but I had Spanish GCE, and I was doing advanced Spanish at Teachers College. So I had the academic background in Spanish. So I was, we were prepared. But then the other side is that we were not going to the Spanish-speaking part of Nicaragua. We were going to the Atlantic coast.
There is an English-speaking part of Nicaragua?
Yes.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah, the city of Bluefields is made up largely of Creole people. Further up the coast is a town called Pearl Lagoon, which is also inhabited by Creole people. And there are several Mosquito communities.
When you say Creole, it means similar to the culture that is here, in language and in culture?
Yeah, and some
Black people?
Last names like Ferguson, Hudson, Smith,
Black people too?
Yeah, black people. And the Mosquito communities were also there in that region. They spoke their Mosquito language as well as English. And then the little known Garifuna communities of Orinoco, Lafay, there in the Pearl Lagoon area also existed. But it was in the process of being prepared for Nicaragua when Dr. Young, who's now our Governor General, was invited to come in and give us a lecture about this region that we were being assigned to, that he informed us that there were English-speaking communities and these indigenous communities as well as Garifuna communities. So when I got to Managua, when we began our orientation, we were given workshops in the pedagogical aspects of working with the textbooks and so on, and given some orientation about cultures of the coast. We were never told about the Garifuna people. It seemed that as far as the establishment was concerned, there was only one group of black people, English-speaking black people on the coast. But I knew and I had heard that there were Garifuna people. And incidentally, one of our facilitators was a Garifuna teacher by the name of Manuel Lopez. And I was introduced to him, and I made a personal request to be assigned to the Garifuna communities on the Atlantic coast. My request was honored. So I was based in the village of Orinoco, not as a literacy teacher. I was given a bigger assignment to be a technical advisor for a group of literacy teachers in a number of surrounding communities. So I was assigned a boat with an outboard engine that would be my transportation to go up the river, around the lagoon, to supervise and give support to the literacy teachers, who themselves were mostly students. And that was a 6-month stint, another life-altering experience. But I came back to Belize then, but I couldn't go back to finish 6 months at Teachers College.
Before going back to Belize, I remember reading on one of the promotional materials for this album that's recently been released, that's where you met a Garifuna man.
Yes.
And he explained to you, you spoke to him in Garifuna. Tell the story.
Father.
You tell the story.
Well, it was in the process of being assigned to the village of Orinoco. We left Bluefields that afternoon, and the Pearl Lagoon is usually calm and still, but occasionally it can get turbulent. And we got caught in a storm on our way to Orinoco. So the boat captain, and darkness was setting in, so the boat captain said, you know what, we won't be able to make it to Orinoco. Let us stop here at Brown Bank and perhaps sleep here overnight, and then in the morning we can proceed to Orinoco. And we diverted and went to Brown Bank, and somebody said, oh, by the way, there is a Carib man here a Carib man like yourself, that the Carib was the acceptable form.
It was
with a
accepted
reference
then.
to, yeah. It was, they didn't know the word Garifuna. They didn't know that that was what we call ourselves. So they said, there's a Carib man here like you. Maybe you could talk Carib to him and he will understand you. I said, really? I would love to meet him. I said, okay, let's surprise him. So we went to this house, and the man had lit his lamp and closed his doors. And when we knocked, he came outside, and it was pretty dark. And he invited us in, and they told him, this young man wants to talk to you. So I said, it means, how are you, my uncle? And the man's eyes just, lit up. And all he could say was, Binarisa now, which means, are you telling me the truth? Is this for real? And he embraced me. Binarisa now. So when Ninaraba Garifuna okay somewhere, I said, it is the truth, I'm a Garifuna like you. And I said, where are you from? I mean, he almost couldn't let me go. I mean, there's an emotional experience for both of us now, because I had heard that very few people were able to speak the language in Nicaragua at that time, and he was one of the last few survivors. So we started a conversation. He probably hadn't spoken Garifuna to anybody for decades. And I told him that I was from Belize, that we still spoke the language here in Belize, and that I was coming to Nicaragua to work on an assignment. And I became his prodigal son, so to speak, for a while until the next morning. But this experience was it really brought home what to me seemed like the future of Garifuna culture in Belize. I said, this is going to happen to us someday. And it was a frightening thought.
Did that impact you in any way that made you feel like you had to do something to prevent that being Belize's future?
Yes, because by the time I got to Orinoco, and before you knew it, the whole village knew that I was a Garifuna boy, 19 years old. And that he was somebody who was 19 who could speak the language like the old ladies from Worcester Point. Because there were 3 old ladies. At that time, they were probably in their 70s. They lived together about a mile outside of Orinoco. And they were the only ones who had Garifuna as their first language. At that time, nobody under the age of 50 was able to hold a conversation. They remembered a few words, never a complete sentence. They knew how to, they would try to impress me by saying, I know how to say, give me some water. And I say, okay, how do you say it? Say, Ruba Musuduna, which is not even complete. It would be Ruba Musuduna no. But it had reached that level of decay. And I decided, you know what, I will dedicate all my efforts, my whole life, to make sure that this does not happen to us in Belize.
But as a program over, you come back to Belize and what?
Belize was facing the heads of agreement, about to become independent. And we did not go back to Teachers College. We were asked to sit out the rest of the year and be assigned to a primary school.
How long were you in Orinoco?
6 months. And by the time I left there, I a member of that community. And we can get back to that. But I sat out the rest of that year and went back to do second year in 1981, 82. 82, 83, I did my internship in Barranco.
Where were you during the Heads of Agreement?
I was in Barranco, and there was no curfew in Barranco.
Were you even aware of what was occurring?
I was aware, but I was able to, I had bought myself one of these huge tape recorders, and I was really into Peter Tosh. Peter Tosh and Bob Marley. I had a kind of revolutionary zeal, so songs like Zimbabwe were getting to me. Equal Rights from Peter Tosh. I was listening to this stuff, and getting immersed in this rebellious approach. I was reading non-fiction, reading the works of revolutionary writers like Paulo Freire, the educator from Brazil. As a matter of fact, I did my thesis on implementing the literacy methods of Paulo Freire within a classroom setting. And my supervisor had no idea who Paulo Freire was or what this new pedagogical approach was, so she had to do research to do her supervision of my work. She was a Peace Corps volunteer. So on one occasion she went home for vacation and came back with a ton
His
load.
thesis for Teachers College?
Yes. So I suppose it did well on my thesis, but I had fallen into this trap of not giving a damn, because I knew that I was going to make it anyway. So I didn't even type my thesis. I submitted a handwritten thing, because I had scored an A on research methodology. But when it comes to the actual thesis, I barely passed because of presentation and I guess content. I didn't pay much attention to it. So I only graduated with credit from Teachers College. I could have graduated with honors had I put in the work.
So you graduated and you started immediately teaching?
Yeah, I left the primary school system then and got a job at what then became Toledo Community College. I was one of the first members of staff at TCC when what was to have been an amalgamation took place. A new government high school and the Catholic Cleaver College. The government high school was not actually built. What happened was that Cleaver College became part of this new institution, which became Toledo Community College. And I was hired as a teacher. And for 4 years, I taught at that institution, teaching different subjects to different classes, but mainly English, Spanish, Belizean studies, literature, and social studies.
How did the social climate in Belize influence you as a person at that time, early 1980s? Heads of Agreement and so on. You mentioned them before.
Although while we were in Nicaragua, there was no structured process of indoctrination or teaching us about socialism or socialist philosophies. Somehow that experience impacted my worldview. So by the time I came back to Belize, I was looking at things in a very broad way. In Nicaragua, for example, we were living the experience of the American embargo against Nicaragua. we were living the experience of the U.S. government financing the counter-revolution. And people whom I knew personally were being killed while I was still there. You know, as a part of this, the war between the Sandinista government and the counter-revolution, which was being financed by the U.S. I remember the government calling upon the citizens to consume less sugar so that they would have more for export to bring in foreign exchange. So for that time, I drank my coffee with no sugar, and I got to like coffee without sugar from that experience. I changed later on. I came back to my sugar because I felt it was good for Belize's economy. The more sugar you consume, the better. But that's a whole other thing. But I had started to observe global power plays. You know, that decisions that affect small countries were not necessarily being made right here, where we live. That in many cases we were being tossed around on this global sea of turbulence, and that powerful governments will make puppets out of small states. I had looked at the Maurice Bishop situation in Grenada. You know, as a matter of fact, there were two brigadistas, that's what we were called, who had come in from Grenada to work in Nicaragua at the time. So that what I was observing in Belize, the whole trend towards independence and self-determination, for me, these things were very, very desirable. That is where I felt Belize needed to be headed, because I had no love for colonialism. I had no love for subjugation of other people's cultures and the imposition of a superior culture over people because they have less military might. So I wanted to see colonialism ended. And I wanted to see an equitable distribution of wealth. That people who had enriched themselves through the colonial process had no position, had no right to continue to impose their will on the less fortunate in the country. These were the ideals that I came back with, and that started to shape my political outlook on Belize and the future of Belize. So that the tide for independence, I was all in favor of Belize getting its independence, because then I would be a proud citizen of my country and not a British subject.
I sense that we're approaching a turning point in not only the direction of the country of Belize, but also a turning point in your life. And so we'll take a break, and we'll come back, and Andy will tell us about the next chapter of his life, which will involve music.